Good morning, everyone. Welcome to AI Minute Mondays, where I take a couple of minutes each Monday to demystify AI for everyone. There's a lot of buzz around vibe coding, which is a software development practice where you're using natural language prompts to instruct AI tools to generate, refine, and debug code. And the focus here is on intent or the vibe rather than the syntax. So in this week's AI Minutes, I have Tom Wisnowski, who's a principal architect within Microsoft's FastTrack engineering team and my former manager, join me to talk about AI and software engineering. So Tom, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And Suchi, thank you for inviting me to have this chat today. I'm really excited about this topic. For everybody in the audience, my background, I've spent about 25 years in industry, mostly on the software development side. Also spent a lot of time in infrastructure and IT strategy, also technical program management, architecture, and that's where I find myself today. So I am the architect for FastTrack engineering.
Thank you so much, Tom. So, can you share some of your thoughts around how we can use AI in software engineering from within the development, test, and deployment life cycles? And where do you think it's helpful? And how much of the code do you think can really be handled by AI?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. We could probably talk all day about that one. So my opinion and my experiences, both just from me personally using it in my day to day, and also talking to many people in industry, also within Microsoft, I truly believe that this is a transformational technology that it can be applied in so many different ways as you think about how you take a concept all the way through early ideation to finally to build and run the ways you can use it and the ways that I use it. So one, definitely on the ideation side. So as I'm thinking about a concept, how I'm thinking about maybe how this concept could be applied in a particular business scenario, I'm going to be chatting with probably Copilot, using researcher quite a bit. Just kind of going back and forth and refining my idea, thinking about like how do I get to a point where I can start to accurately describe maybe some of the core features, start to build out a product spec that then I can carry forth into a design and then maybe a prototyping stage. And then, of course, as you described, we can generate a lot of code today. The platforms, the AIs, they understand quite a bit about most of the languages that are available today, trained very well. They make mistakes, absolutely. But I think, if you're building, certainly like a web platform or a standard full stack, web application, quite capable of doing that end to end. It is a little bit of art and science. So I always encourage people to really go hands-on and start to experience these platforms and these tools yourself, because there is a technique that you learn over time, which is like, how do you actually talk to an agent, right? How do you get it to understand your intent? Because words do matter. And it's kind of funny, like sometimes how you just change just a few words in your prompt and you can get a completely different response. But certainly software development, actually generating the code is a strong suit. Especially as you think about recent innovations with like agent mode and agents in GitHub. So now I can basically assign an agent to go off and do work somewhat autonomously in GitHub, which is fantastic. And you're seeing that work across the board in industry in a number of tools. But also, definitely I use it quite a bit for DevOps. So understanding some of the things that are happening in my applications. I would have to admit that sometimes I get a little lazy sometimes if I have a really complex set of telemetry data or log data. I prefer to let the AI walk through that itself and tell me what it thinks could possibly be going on based on its understanding of my code base and also the additional context of the logs and telemetry. So that's just a really great place as well. So I look at it as you can really use these tools end to end in the entire spectrum of software development and actually just product development. So going beyond just the development of the software itself, but thinking about the product experience. So I really just encourage everybody to be curious. This is a rapidly changing space. And when I say rapidly, you see new capabilities and features launching daily. Something that may not work very well, let's say in VS Code today, you could try that exact same prompt tomorrow, and all of a sudden it has better understanding, chain of thought, and it's able to execute. So try to stay up, explore, experiment. Also, be patient, right? That's another piece of guidance I like to give. Sometimes things are not going to work as you expect, and that's part of the experience of the journey, right? So embrace that. Don't give up. Think about like, well, how could I have possibly have asked the question a different way, or presented my prompt in a different way? Could I have brought in some additional context that could have helped? Could I have created maybe instruction sets or other things? Again, context that really just helps the platform, the agent, the model understand your true intent and get to a successful outcome. Again, it's art and science, so always practice.
Thank you, Tom, for those insights. So we've talked about how you can use AI in every aspect of the software engineering lifecycle and in product development. So let's talk about some of the cons. So there have been several concerns which are raised in the industry about AI written code and whether it's really secure. And also, there have been the fallout where engineers have used code which is written by AI without understanding it completely, and therefore they're not able to debug it or troubleshoot, or they take a far longer cycle to do that. So what are your thoughts on these cons and any other cons that you may have noticed, and how can we basically overcome them?
Oh, it's another great question. And first, you're absolutely correct in stating that the platforms are not perfect. The agents are not perfect. They are going to make mistakes. They sometimes do hallucinate. And that's why they need us as their pair programmer. And so the first thing that I always like to express as I'm talking to someone about using some of these tools in their production use, the first thing that we all have to fully embrace and accept is we're always accountable for whatever we generate. So that means I am responsible for that code, no different than if I would have written every line of code myself. And that means, if I would have gone out to the internet, perhaps copied a sample from someone's blog, or your favorite site, or sample code from GitHub, you're just as equally responsible for that, right? So treat these AIs, these agents as tools. Ultimately, you are the engineer. So the buck always stops with you. So that's the first bit of a guidance that I always give. So if you don't understand the code, that's also another great place where AI can help. So go into ask mode. I'm using VS Code samples here, but ask mode and talk to an agent or talk to the platform and say, please explain this to me, right? Allow it to give you some references, do the research, but understand exactly what code it wrote, understand the logic flow, and always be fully accountable for what you create and what you generate. As far as security, it's a good question. So it's getting a lot better, right? Naturally, with higher level abstract prompts. But if you were to simply say, please create an application and follow all security's best practices, it would do a decent job of trying to understand what that means. And if you had perhaps maybe the right tools that are added to your environment, and those would be like MCP servers or things that could bring additional context, it's going to search the internet. It's going to try to do a good job understanding what be secure means. But that's very abstract, right? And so just as if you were talking to another human programmer, if you said, "We'll do it securely," they may not fully understand exactly what that means. They may not have that experience. So can AIs generate secure code? Yes, they can if they are guided in doing so. And that's where I think it's important, where we as engineers, we start to elevate ourselves into the conversation. It's not that the code itself is not important. Again, you have to look at the code. You have to understand what's being generated. But as these platforms and these agents get better and better and better at understanding the languages and understanding the frameworks and writing higher quality code, we can spend maybe a little bit less time and focus ourselves higher up in the value stack, which is really thinking about system design, thinking about security, thinking about scalability, reliability, operations, all the things that today, if you don't really directly express in your prompts and guide the agents to go create, they're probably not going to go do. So yes, you can create very scalable, secure solutions, but it requires your expertise, your experience as a software developer and architect to ask very specific questions, right? And guide it in things like, don't put secrets in your code, right? Use like Vault or other technologies. So all those best practices, and then again, you are ultimately accountable for reviewing the code, reviewing design, and making sure those things are actually happening. So, do I think it'll improve over time? Absolutely. I think, as we look at just the capability of these agents and what they're able to do, just in comparison to even what was available 6 months ago, it's absolutely astonishing. But I still think today, 100%, it still requires human in the loop for anything that you're doing, especially anything in production. The other, I wouldn't call it a con, but something that we do need to think about is because we are accountable for doing the review and understanding the code base. AIs are incredibly, let's say, energetic, right? They can create a lot of changes across your code base very quickly. And so quickly you can find yourself maybe inundated with all these changes that you have to review. So think about that as you're prompting and you're creating or generating these solutions. Think about the volume you're generating and making sure that you're being scoped enough so that you can actually take the time and review this, or you have the right SDLC process and governance in place that you can do those reviews. Now, the beauty of it is you can also include AI in that review process, not to fully replace the human, but certainly to do the first pass and have it find things that perhaps maybe you weren't even thinking about. We actually have plenty of examples, and I've personally have experienced where I've asked my agents to go do a thorough review of the code base, and it's come up with some interesting findings that I didn't necessarily pick up on when I did my human review. So it's just that pair programming paradigm, right? It's there as your co-pilot, but it requires a pilot, right? And so that's where I think you have to be very aware of those challenges and have a plan to address them. I also think there's an aspect of safety, right, that you have to consider. And so I'm sure probably many people have heard about the recent example of the AI platform that went ahead and deleted a production database. It probably maybe was thinking like, hey, I have to make a schema change, and of course, the easiest thing for me to do is drop this table and I can rebuild it. So my first question would be, why did you have that AI agent directly connected to a production runtime system? Second, what did that prompt look like? What controls or safety measures were in place to ensure that that type of destructive behavior couldn't happen? I would say, like in that scenario, certainly letting AI think through the change and think through what needs to be implemented and building a set of scripts or code or things that are needed to implement the change is great, because then you have the opportunity to review it, and then it's your decision ultimately to push it to production. But simply just letting an agent just connect to a production system, probably where agents are today, doesn't make a lot of sense. And then I think be realistic and rational with where you're generating code and if it makes sense or not. We have lots of examples all across Microsoft where we're generating a ton of code, right? We are, I think Satya recently mentioned at least 30%. I firmly believe it's actually more than that now. But the reality is there's some aspects of the code base that maybe don't make sense. Maybe some very critical areas of your business or your code base that just need that very senior level experienced engineer to go in there and fine tune an engineer. But that still doesn't mean that the AI can't help, right? The AI can still be helping the engineer, like doing research, coming up with options, providing its own assessment, but then ultimately maybe your human engineers doing the work. So I think it's be reasonable. But the beauty of this is the rate at which it's improving and changing, right? So I firmly do believe that a lot of these challenges and gaps that we're all experiencing and seeing, they're going to be solved over time. Does it ever get to a state where it's 100% perfect? I don't know. But today it's not. So today, absolutely, it is a co-pilot and requires the pilot to be in the pilot seat.
Thank you, Tom, for sharing those insights. I love how you stated that AI is not replacing the human, but it's your co-pilot. You are still the pilot. You still have ownership. And you have ownership for every piece of code, whether it's written by AI. As long as you incorporate it, it's yours. So
A hundred percent.
those are some of the key takeaways. Thank you so much. And just to summarize, we've talked through using AI in every aspect of software engineering, and we see that there are definite benefits, right from accelerated development cycles to reduced errors, if used ethically and correctly with experienced developers in the pilot seat. Thanks, Tom. And that's all that we have in AI Minutes today. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.